Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another live edition of Mic'd Up Sports, the show that goes in depth with the people who build our sports community. Now, if you've been following my podcast or my YouTube channel over the years, and if you've been following high school hoops in the state of Minnesota, you probably know all about the buzz when Paige Bueckers committed to UConn to continue playing college basketball. That being said, she will not be the first Hopkins graduate to attend UConn because my guest today predated her by a few years. I don't know who the first Hopkins graduate to attend UConn was, but we have Taylor Anderson, who attended UConn on a track and field scholarship, and she is hoping to qualify for the Summer Olympics next year in Tokyo, continuing to train in track, still holds state records from her time in the blue and white at Hopkins. Taylor, thanks for coming on.
Hi, how you doing? I'm glad to be here.
And Taylor, it's been so long since we last crossed paths because I would see you at the state tournament and some other games. But when I watched some of your recent interviews, I'm like, it's been so long. The last time I saw you, you didn't have a nose ring.
Yeah, it has been a while.
But if you don't mind me starting with that, I don't know how much you follow the prep scene after you graduated from Hopkins and then went on to have a stellar career at UConn, but how surreal is it for you to find out that another Hopkins standout would be attending UConn?
I thought it was awesome. I definitely reached out to Paige, just trying to give her a couple pointers about campus, just being a student athlete. And just the whole thing about UConn is just a family. It's the culture there. We're a winning culture. So it's just it's like the best atmosphere you could be in for college, I would say. It's competitive. We go up against the SEC schools, but we also go up against the Pac-12 schools. So you see a lot of different talents and different skills you learn over at UConn.
And I was watching some interviews of yours recently in preparation for this podcast, and I heard that you had some interest for UConn basketball back in the day.
I did. They offered me a half scholarship over at UConn for basketball. But for track, I was offered 5 years full scholarship. So obviously I went with track. That was just where my heart was. I love basketball to this day. I still go out and hoop when I can or shoot around when I can. But track was definitely the one that I picked from in the end.
You had quite a few options. Of course, I saw you through basketball, or that's how I got to meet you. But I remember how quick you were moving about the court. And then I got to see you compete in track for a few events, including the state meets at Hamlin. Have you ever thought about what might have changed or what things would have been like if you had pursued basketball instead of track? Because from what I heard, you had an equal level of talent in both sports.
I did. For me, I think my path would have been not if the WNBA, then playing overseas and just continuing to play basketball and doing what I love. But the dynamic between basketball and track, yeah, I had to be a top athlete at our school. We had so many great athletes at our school, like Nia Coffey, who's now in the WNBA, who was on my team during that year. So just having the dynamic of being an athlete is important.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I'm wondering what your take on what has happened to Hopkins since you graduated. I had Nia Holly on back in the summer, and we had a lengthy conversation about how Hopkins was a big deal when you were attending. You were teammates with Nia Coffey. Nia Holly was just starting out. She became a Miss Basketball winner. Nia Coffey, of course, in the WNBA, and so many other Division I athletes. And then here comes Paige and her crew.
Right.
We thought Hopkins was a big deal when you were a student there. And then Paige and her team, Layla Chacolis and Maya Naji, Amaya Battle, KK Adams, all of those outstanding players, they take it up to 11. They get a national following. I mean, how crazy is it that what we thought, when you thought the school couldn't get any bigger in terms of notoriety, Paige and her team find a way to redefine it?
It's like it's funny because all of those kids that are on that team now grew up going to camps with us and, coming to our open gyms. We were like their leaders for the day. So just seeing them come up and blossom and kind of like take our path and make it higher is is amazing. I think it's so cool that they got a show. I wish we had a show back then, but different times. But I think it's just awesome how they just carried Hopkins to a whole new level. It's just amazing to see and watch. And I try to attend a couple games when I come home. So show some love to Hopkins.
The most surreal aspect about that for me is, in particular with Paige, the following she got, and it led to an interview with Breanna Stewart over the summer through Instagram, first high school athlete to be featured in Slam magazine. And when I've covered Hopkins, I have in recent games, whoever gets to cover Hopkins on YouTube, there's a massive following. People are chiming in, and there are a lot of like smart, knowledgeable fans out there when they watch that team. And I'm going, how many of them would know that long before Paige, they produced a WNBA talent in Nia Coffey?
No, they had no idea. I think it's just because our times were different, I guess. Everything's more on social media nowadays. So players are getting more notoriety. In college, you're getting paid for your image now. So I think that just being in 2020 and having social media as a powerful tool to help monetize is great.
And I understand that's something you're trying to do. You have over 14,000 followers on Instagram. And I remember reading you're trying to build up enough of a following to get monetization status. So, how has that experience been for you, building up your brand? You run your own business called TRA Fitness, if I remember correctly. What has that journey been like?
So I started off partnering with my sister Elise Anderson, who also ran track at Hopkins and UConn. So we partner with a company called Higher Marketing. We have 40 plus million follower network on Instagram where we promote brands, businesses, athletes, artists, celebrities. We do blue check verification, and we also do music streaming. So once I got into that, it opened up so many different doors for me. I'm doing PR, and I'm a contributor for Yahoo News and Girl Boss. So different magazines and press articles we can put out. So for me, it's just growing my following so I can get more sponsorships for track and just be able to make money off the track.
Now, if you don't mind going back a little bit in your history, the running joke among your family is you're all thoroughbreds, or that's the nickname that you've all given yourselves. Your parents, of course, both Division I athletes, and your father actually got to play in the NFL with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the foundation was there in terms of your passion for sports. But do you remember the first moment that got you into basketball or track or some of the other activities you were a part of? What was the first moment that got you hooked on this journey of athletics?
For basketball, I would say my dad just bringing me down. My mom and dad just bringing me down to the YMCA, and I got to play on an all boys team. I was the only girl on the team, and I was just killing them. And then once track came around, we started out running track though. I started running at 2. I was at every practice when I couldn't even run or compete because you had to be 5 years old. So track, I just kind of came out the womb running. That's why they call us thoroughbreds.
And over time, how would you say you balance the two? Because you were a great basketball athlete, and I think you would have had a lot of success there. You were fielding some Division I offers, and at the same time, I'll never forget just watching you blaze through the track. I don't know I don't think I saw you get the state record in the 100-meter race, but I remember at a late conference meet and the state meets, every time you went on the starting blocks, there was this sense of anticipation. I knew when I was calling some of those events or covering it, I was excited because I'm thinking, how fast is she going to run today?
Yeah, balancing the 2 sports was pretty hard in high school, but you just got to know when to take a break and really focus on your recovery and making sure that your body is in tip-top shape or at 100%, because balancing the 2 sports, basketball's first, so it kind of runs into track season. So I used to take a week off, and then I used to be right back on the track getting ready for the season. So balancing is definitely important, but rehabbing is the key to maintaining 2 sports.
And your story is interesting in the sense we hear a lot more about specialization, which some athletes have done. And if that's what they want to do, I certainly won't oppose that. some of our top athletes were single sport, or maybe they took up sports early on, but decided to focus exclusively on one. But when you look at the likes of Nia Coffey or Paige Bueckers or Rebecca Dahlman, who still holds the state record for most career points, you can't argue with those decisions.
Right.
But you are almost a rarity at a large school like Hopkins or Minnetonka, EP, all of these big schools where it feels like it's harder to make multiple sports on varsity because you have such a huge student body, a huge pool of athletes to draw from, but you found a way to make it work. What kept you at both of those sports when maybe you could have decided on one?
Well, one was just dedication, just finding my niche and knowing which sport I wanted to do. And instead of just picking one, I just picked two because they're both in 2 different seasons. So track is obviously my dominant sport, but basketball, I like to cross train. My parents always taught us to cross train in different sports. So when I was running track when I was little, I was doing dance, gymnastics, basketball, just learning what sport I like and which one I can be the most dominant in.
And although you said you came out of the womb running and how athletics have given your family nickname Thoroughbreds, when did you sense that your interest, your passion for basketball or track and field, when did you get the idea that it could take you somewhere?
When I was playing AAU for Farview, we used to play with Nia too as well. Just knowing that I'm quick and I can get up and down the court pretty fast. It was easy for me to do basketball, but I did get a lot of traveling calls, not gonna lie.
You had track on the brain, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. You know, my feet started moving faster than my hands are moving, so I did get a lot of traveling calls.
So I could see it now. You get a steal or get ready to go in the fast break or a leak out, and the first thought is, "Oh, it's just like track."
Yeah.
Now I see why you picked track over basketball.
Yes.
We tease, of course, but how exciting was it to get the opportunities to compete in state in both basketball and track? You do, of course, everyone knows how Hopkins has a strong basketball pedigree. It's something of a running gag, but we've seen them do well in track events, whether it's True Team or the Hamlin Elite Meet or the state meets. I think you helped Hopkins claim some state track championships for the school when you were there. So how cool was that, where you had an opportunity to give Hopkins a spotlight in a sport that traditionally is one of their powerhouses, but then another sport that reminds folks, hey, we can do more than just ball?
So for basketball, because it always comes first in the season, for basketball, it was amazing to win my first championship because I had Brianna Williams, Julia Weimer, Sydney Coffey. That was our first championship. So we were still a little young. Me, Nia, McCalla, we were all pretty young for doing our first championship. But for track, that next season, we won it as a team. I probably did 4 events between me, my sister, and our relay team. We had a couple 800s and 400 girls. So just winning that first championship in track in Hopkins history was the most important for me, more than all the basketballs put together, because it was a first. Yeah.
No, that makes perfect sense, because you had the three-peat at Hopkins, which they had never accomplished before and haven't since then. But none of those titles will ever be the first one, because you have to go back to, I think, 06 at least, if my memory is right. But in track, you'll always be a member of that first team to win a state title.
Oh, yeah.
But how cool was it to get that opportunity to experience a three-peat at Hopkins with the Coffey sisters and Brianna Williams, and then you got to help mentor the likes of Nia Holly as she was making her way up, and then do the same thing for track?
So for us, it was like, we have to get three-peat because it hasn't been done before. So we're a winning culture over Hopkins. So we put three-peat on our brain and we went for it. We know that if we had a pretty good season, we can make it to the state championship. All we have to do is go out there and what we do best. What we've been doing all season is winning, executing, playing defense. Coach Kaz loves defense.
He did, although he didn't mind offense either. The last couple of years, I think Hopkins led the state in scoring over 80
Oh
points per
yeah.
game. So I often joke that they have a strong defense, and it showed in some of those tight
Mhm.
games. But I've said it seems like the last couple of years, their best defense is just to outscore everybody. And
Yep.
but it was no different when you were playing, and you had a lot of athletes. You of course
Oh
had the
yeah.
crossover athleticism on your side, but Hopkins, I would say, one of the fastest teams in terms of pace. So their strategy to winning was, yes, we'll play defense, but we're also going to try to wear out the opponent, make you tired, and make it a game of possessions. Just rack up the number of possessions, keep the pace
Hmm.
up, and more often than not, it worked.
Yeah, it's definitely the way to play.
On the basketball side of things, how did you approach it? I'm sure you were aware of the culture. You didn't have the
Hmm.
three-peat yet, but you already had a couple of titles, or I should say the school had a couple of titles. I think '04 and '06, now that I
Yeah.
remember. And they had some strong seasons leading up to that three-peat. So there was a strong culture, a strong history associated with that
Hmm.
program. How nervous did that make you, or were you able to embrace it smoothly?
Well, I've been playing for Hopkins for at least since sixth grade. We played, traveling basketball. So we were over at West Junior High practicing because we weren't old enough to even play JV. So by the time we got in eighth grade, we were allowed to play JV and move up into the varsity game. So they bridge you pretty well between traveling basketball and being able to play JV into varsity. Just the Hopkins program in general, they get you ready for each level that you're going to play at. So.
And you mentioned Farview a few minutes ago, and my light bulb went off because so many talented student athletes came from that
Mhm.
program. I did not know you were part of the Farview Club.
Yes, I had two championships with them for AAU. Yes.
And I just think of all the names that came out of there. I think Layla was a part of it. Andrea Adams from
Hmm.
Como Park. Nia Holly was a part of it.
Yep.
Kanisha Bell, I believe.
Yes. Yep. We were all there together.
How do you think that helped you become a solid basketball athlete, even if you were getting called for travels more frequently than your teammates?
My parents just put me in the position to do well in each sport that I have on my plate. So for them to put me in the Farview program, they know it's an elite AAU program and we're going to travel and play against the best in the country. So with that, we already know that our team is going to be pretty decent. We can take it on the road and everybody does what they do best and they show out their talents. And Farby was very successful when I was there.
And while we joked about your traveling calls, how do you think your speed? It might seem like a silly question for us because we are both basketball fans, but how do you think your speed helped out the Royals when you were wearing the basketball shorts?
So we are a transition team. We push the ball fast in transition. As soon as the ball comes out the net, it's down the court. So for us, I'm quick, Nia's long. So we've been playing against with each other since Farview. I've known Nia for a long time. She ran track with me in AAU. So we just had that bond. If I get out the basket, I'm gonna push it. So me being able to get down and up and down the floor, just being as short as I was in high school, was incredible.
And over time, how did that bond develop as you made that transition from the Farview AAU rec days to attending Hopkins large school? They host a lot of events like the Tip Off Classic. So it's
Mm-hmm.
a frequently used site. A lot of people know what that school means for
Mm-hmm.
basketball and other sports. So, how did that bond with Nia Coffey and her older sister, Brianna Williams, all of the other Hopkins athletes? Shackelford, I think, was in that group too.
Yep.
How did that grow as you were making your way through Hopkins, picking up titles and yeah, making history along the way?
So we've been playing against each other or with each other before we even got into high school. So by the time we did get to JV, our bond was already made. We had training camps all through the summer. We're all with each other every day. We go out to eat. You know, you just create that bond, just kind of automatic. But knowing each other from past, even with Aaron coming from Wyzetta, Aaron O'Toole, coming over to Hopkins, we played against each other in traveling basketball. So we all knew each other. You know, we were friends off the court, but never on the court.
How exciting was it to pick up that first state championship? You talked about how you were still one of the young guns in the first of those
Mm-hmm.
three-peats, but that set a precedent. And I think that three-peat over time helped the rest of the state get better too, because we saw how difficult it was for Hopkins to stay on top. And that's not a
Mm-hmm.
knock against them. It's just kind of like when, well, you're familiar with dynasties, the UConn women
Yes.
winning 4 in a row. At some point, the other schools get sick of hearing about, is this bad for the sport? Or, oh, let's give the trophy to
Right.
UConn or Hopkins. And like, how do we take it from them? But how exciting was it to win a state championship in your sophomore season? And how do you think that fed into your junior and senior years as you kept racking up wins and trophies?
I think it kind of set the tone for the rest of my high school career. Winning that first one is like, it makes you hungry because you know what you have to do to get to that level and you know you have to beat. So for us to have that at such a young age, it kind of set a dynasty like, okay, this is the level we need to be at. This is where we need to be for the season if we want to get to the championships. And, you know, Coach Kaz is an amazing coach. He gives you so much support. He makes you watch film, makes you know exactly what you're supposed to be doing on each position or possession or on the court. So he makes you learn your skill and everybody else's job on the court as well. So nobody has confusion.
And then as you continued in your junior and senior seasons, adding those 2 additional titles, what did you enjoy most about that run? And how do you think it helped establish your legacy, your reputation as a tremendous athlete?
Mm-hmm. It was just the atmosphere of being, you know, around our friends and our family, you know, all the fans that come to the game, especially at the Target Center when it was at the Target Center. He's just being able to play on the Timberwolves floor is a dream, of course, because the NBA court. So just being there and being like present in the moment it was just something you can't even take back or, you know, it's something you have to live in. You know, there's video of the games and everything, but it's not the same without like being on the court.
That makes sense. And what do you think that did to motivate you as an athlete, even though basketball was your secondary sport? How did that fuel your motivation?
It made me want to double in track, you know, kind of even up my state championships. So getting one in basketball, I'm like, okay, now that I have my sister on the team over at Hopkins, we can definitely double for track. So just having our relays and being able to score all these points and, you know, really pulling out a team win because we didn't think we were to win the first one, which is funny. It came down to the end, the 4x4, of course, the last race of the meet. So that was the nail biter, but that one was like the best one for me.
And that makes for a good segue because you won, I think, multiple state championships, both in individual races and in the team category with how they score it. So, what was the atmosphere like for track? It doesn't have the same following as basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for me, I enjoy watching track and field, or as the Olympics call it, athletics, which I find amusing. But there's so many events spaced out in a meet or in the
Mm-hmm.
Olympic period, as you know, over a week-long period. So it's difficult to focus on one specific athlete when you have so many disciplines within it. You have the 100 meters, the
Right.
sprint races, and then you have the 5,000, 10,000 meters, for example, as distance running. And then you get into the other events like pole vault and javelin,
Mm-hmm.
shot put. So there's so many things going on at once. It's hard to keep track of it all. But you mentioned some of the nerves with basketball. I think there was a sense
Mm-hmm.
of confidence because you knew the talent. And I've always said that Hopkins starting five, whether it was the three-peat era or what we saw with Paige and her crew, one of the
Right.
most ferocious, potent starting lineups out there. In track, different story. You don't get the hype. You don't have
Mm-hmm.
thousands of followers watching you or following your every move. What is the difference in culture, and do you think that helped relieve some tension, or did it create some other nerves, if you know what I mean?
Well, Hopkins is a basketball school, so there's not much pressure on track. But once I came from basketball and went to track, it's kind of like the hype kind of followed me. For track, everybody knew because I've been running since I was 2. I ran AAU. Just individually, I can see different athletes from Minnesota because they all run AAU as well. So we all meet up in the summer. We run against each other. So everybody knows everybody in track. That's the only thing. It's a small world. It's not like basketball. There's plenty of schools. For track, it's a small world. Everybody knows everybody because you ran against them at some point in your career in your 4 years. But for track, it's cool because it's individually, it's on you, but you're also part of a team. So you can get your individual title, but you can get your state championship title as well for the team. But the hype for me, I think just having Wincia, she was my training partner, Wincia Johnson. I had so many like powerful athletes coming up when I was still, younger and not running as fast. Just having those people to look at and kind of push for and kind of want to beat, it was a goal for me. So track really wasn't stressful at all because I've been doing it for so long. But the atmosphere of track is completely different from basketball because everybody has to be quiet at the start. And then it just starts getting crazy. But as an athlete, you have to block that out. So the atmosphere is definitely different for track. And everybody kind of stands up at the end just to see who won. So track is awesome. I love it.
And a point related to that, I've always wondered for track athletes, especially those who compete in the running events, whether it's the sprint races or the distance events. Well, distance, it's less of an issue, but how nerve-wracking is it when you go to the starting blocks and you have to wait for the gun or the bell to go off? It's almost like in Jeopardy, you have to wait to ring in for a clue.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that moment of tension where you're trying to time it so you don't get caught behind, but you don't want to jump it, get called for a false start, and then you're out of the event. How nerve-wracking is that moment when you get to the starting blocks and wait for the signal?
I still feel that to this day. It's like butterflies in your stomach, like kind of feels like you got a little tightness in your chest. But once you hear, on your marks, that all kind of drowns away. You just kind of have to focus in on your lane and kind of run your own race. For me, I just kind of take a deep breath, like, you got this. This isn't something you haven't done before. So just execute your race and stay in your lane and you will do the best you can.
Now, you joked about the number of traveling calls you got in basketball. How many times were you flagged for a false start?
Very few, very few. Probably like 1 or 2, but I never got put out the race. But definitely called for false start, yes.
I think it helps. I think the first time it's a warning in most meets.
Yes.
And then the second time is like, okay, then that's when you really have to make sure you're
right.
Get a clean start. But that is amusing, like 2 false starts. And I'm guessing you had at least 10 times as many traveling calls.
Oh yeah, I got called for travels all the time.
Did that become a running joke when you were playing at Hopkins, all the times you got called for traveling?
Oh yeah, or running too fast. You have to slow down as a track runner, and it's hard to stop and go, once you're up and running for me at top speed. So I have to learn how to slow down and kind of take breaks and like cut and shift for basketball. But track, you just run in a straight line. So sometimes my brain gets confused.
Well, I was going to say you probably would have fared better, I think, in the college or pro circuit if you went with basketball because the court is 10 feet longer.
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
You would have used all of that extra space.
To slow down, yes.
Or to slow down or just to outrun the competition as you did so many times. Who were your idols in those sports? Because you were enthusiastic about both basketball and track. That much I remembered. Who were your idols growing up in those 2 sports?
For basketball, of course, it's Maya Moore. I got to meet her. She's very cool. I met her more than once. Met her mom and her family. So she had a big impact on me because she went to UConn. So that was one of my dream schools, of course, to play basketball at if I was going to choose basketball. But for track, I would say Jackie Junior Kersey or FloJo, because she's fabulous. She comes, keep to the track. She does her thing. She has the fastest time in the world. So I have her book. So I've had her book since I was a kid. My mom gave it to me, so that's just been kind of two empowering women in my life.
How did you meet Maya Moore? Telling me you met her multiple times. Of course, you have the UConn connection, even though she graduated before you got there. How did that come about? And how surreal, how exciting was it for you to meet one of the most decorated WNBA athletes, and now to see her continue that legacy with criminal justice reform, getting her now husband out of prison?
So my friend Alexis Jones, she used to play for the Lynx as well. She invited me to a couple games.
Did she play for Baylor?
Yes, she did. She plays for a different WNBA team, but I'm not sure.
I think it's the Sparks now, but I do remember Alexis.
So. Yeah, so she invited me to a couple games, and I got to, go in the locker room and meet some of the players and their parents. So I got to meet Maya a couple of times. I just got to go. I went to the WNBA semifinals at the barn at the U of M. So I got to see all the players, meet everybody. It was awesome. She's cool. We took a picture together. So she's very nice. She's very focused as an athlete. I like that. She does what she does.
And I interviewed Maya several times throughout her playing career, her rookie season up until her last season in 2018. Who knows if she'll come back? But even if she doesn't, you can't argue with what she has accomplished. But you're right, highly focused athlete and kind of choosy about when she speaks out about things. But you can see over time, she's embraced that dual role of being an athlete and an advocate for, you probably remember the Black Lives Matter messaging that they did in 2016. And then how Maya took 2 years off to help her family friend, who then became her husband, Jonathan Irons. Everyone thought, like, if this had been the NBA, it would have been front page news. And even if it's the WNBA, there were folks going, like, it would be crazy to stop in the peak of your career. And it wasn't like Michael Jordan, who retired to focus on baseball. She took a complete sabbatical from sports.
Right.
How surreal was that to you meet someone and then to take that step? That's something I don't know if we'll ever see that again. It's hard to say, but it's a rare thing to do, but it paid off well. Then again, all she does is win. So we've seen this coming, right?
Right. For her, or for me as well, what I see, she's stepping outside of basketball. It's bigger than basketball right now, and she gets that. It's bigger than sports. There's bigger things, bigger issues we have going on right now in the world. It's 2020. So for her to do that it just speaks to her character. She's focused on basketball, but more important things are in her focus right now. So I respect that completely.
So there are a couple of questions I had related to this meeting with Maya Moore. How did you get to meet Alexis Jones, since the two of you competed in different sports in college? We'll start with that.
So my uncle, he supports her in her basketball. So he's, her cousin, I guess. But he contacted me once she got drafted to the Lynx. So we hung out that whole summer. She got drafted, and then they ended up winning. So I got to meet the whole team, go to all the games. We went out after, had a good time. But Alexis Jones, she's a great athlete. If I was playing, that's exactly who I would want to play like. She's got handle. She's shifty. She's quick up and down the court. She has a good three. So I think she's a good person.
And what kind of conversations did you have with Maya, and what reaction did she have, if you remember, if you got the opportunity to tell her, hey, I'm a UConn graduate too?
Oh, she said, go Huskies right away. Cause I think I had a UConn hat on when I went to the game. She's like, go Huskies. I was like, yeah, I went to UConn, I ran track. But I initially met her mom first, and I didn't even know it was Maya's mom. We were just in the locker room waiting around for them to come out. She's like, yeah, I was like, yeah, you know, I went to UConn. She's like, my daughter went to UConn. I was like, who's your daughter? She's like, oh, it's Maya. I was like, oh my gosh, no, I already knew that, obviously, but I had to play like I didn't. But when she came, I was like, yeah, I met your mom. You know, I used to go to UConn. I met to seen you at a couple games. Because you know, all the alumni come back to UConn. Everybody comes back, especially for our opening night for basketball. So you get to see everybody, which is cool.
And when it's UConn, they mean everybody. Maya Moore, Tina Charles, Diana Taurasi, if you go way back, Sue Bird, Swing Cash. Sue Bird still winning titles, and now she's turned 40 and doesn't look a day over 30 when you see what she's able to do. And more recently, Crystal Dangerfield, Nafisa Collier. Funny thing is, the funny story actually is virtually, but I met Nafisa's mom through social media. Well, because I was following the links again, I took some time away from the WNBA because there were some other things and I was involved in. It got to be a little too much, and you'll never see me ripping on women's sports. I think I would be excommunicated from the state if that ever happened. But of course, with the pandemic, not a whole lot to do. So I'm like, you know what? I guess I'll see what the links are all about, because everyone thought, oh, their best years are behind them. And now they have this new core with Collier and Dangerfield. And then I just happened to get in touch with their mother. And so I introduced myself just to let her know that, hey, I'm not doing this to try to get to your daughter or anything. It's just, oh, hey, let's introduce ourselves a little bit. And we talked for a little while, and it's fun. But covering the WNBA as I did for 10 years, I think kind of helped me even with high school games. I don't know how much you follow it now, but when I get to cover Hopkins or another high caliber player like Adalia McKenzie or Sarah Scally, who went to Minnesota, for the viewers, it's exciting to see them play. For me, and no offense to your alma mater, but it's like I treat Hopkins like I would treat any other team. This is just another game. I happen to know a little more about them because of their notoriety, but they all have parents, and you can attest to this. It wasn't just Nia Coffey that made your three-peat teams click. It wasn't just Paige Bueckers behind the success that Hopkins had in recent years. Leila Chacolas comes to mind, you know, the 5'6" guard who could rebound with the best of them. And I'm going, is she crazy to get in there with these 6'2", 6'3"s? Like, no, she just was fearless, didn't let her size get to her. And Amaya Battle, Maya Naji, I was saying, we all knew Hopkins would look different, but I'm going, I think we have the future of this team with those two players right there. Like, they get after it. And I give a lot of credit to Paige, especially this last season, because I think she said, I know I can score 40, so I don't have anything to prove. So I'd rather help facilitate. And I think it helps. And UConn, they're going to get a bona fide scorer and facilitator. But how cool was it to reflect on those meetings with Maya, even if you didn't get to, I don't know how long you got to chat, but to get those opportunities to see her win that fourth title and do it against the team that beat them the previous year. You had the hoopla with the shot clock violation. So the narrative, you couldn't make it up either. Lindsay Whalen winning her last title at the venue, the arena, where she became a household name. What do you remember? You're right. What is the coolest thing about getting that chance to meet with a fellow UConn graduate?
It was amazing. She's such a beautiful soul. Like, she's so down to earth, you know. She doesn't act like a celebrity or anything like that. She just gives you good vibes, you know. We didn't talk for too long, but just her character just gives off good vibes.
And then when I mentioned some of the other names that come out of UConn, your face lit up. So what kind of rapport, friendships did you build with the UConn athletes, even though you were more incognito in college because you competed in track? And that's not an indication of your abilities. It's just UConn and women's basketball
go hand in hand.
Well, just like Hopkins and women's basketball.
So at school, all the athletes hang out together. We mostly all live in the same dorms. So we see each other all the time. Study hall, that's a big thing for athletics. So you get to see different sports, go out on the weekends. But Stewie, that's my girl. Nafisa, I hit her up when she got drafted to Minnesota. I've known Crystal forever since she was a freshman. So Mariah Jefferson, I know the past 5 years of athletes that came out of UConn girls basketball, because all the athletes are friends, because everybody knows what struggle you're going through. So
I'm wondering, did you ever take them up in basketball, or did they ever try to test your abilities? Because I see you could still hoop, even though your focus is on track. But I'm wondering, were there ever any friendlies between yourself and some of those UConn basketball athletes?
oh yes, I did a couple open gyms with them. I ran a couple open gyms with them. They were like, oh, you could actually play. Like, yeah, I just ran track.
And how did that turn out? Who won those friendlies in the open gym sessions?
I mean, our team won a couple of times. We got beat a couple of times, but look who we're playing against.
Hey, you got a couple of wins against them, but I think it's hilarious. I'm wondering if they were more surprised to see your skills in basketball.
Yeah.
Because you knew going in, it's like, all right, you knew they were exceptional athletes. Brianna Stewart, she, of course, is a legend in her own right. And Dangerfield, I'm starting to think other teams might have regretted passing her up
yes.
when she fell to the second round, because she was undersized. But you can speak to that. Although I think you're 5'8", 5'9". So I'm like, you're not that small, if I remember.
She's quick. I like that. Crystal's my girl.
She's quick. She can hit threes. And then Nafisa, kind of like Maya, an all-around athlete. I don't know if I'm hoping selfishly that Maya comes back, not because I want to see her get more titles or to try to validate my own credentials, but I wanted her to come back selfishly so that I can see her and Nafisa Collier play alongside each other, because I would think
that'd be amazing
to have two options at the three like that, and then you can move them around. I'm like, oh, those two would have a lot of fun, I bet.
Very versatile. Very versatile.
So, since we're talking about UConn, you, I think up until, I don't know when your tipping point was, but you were going between basketball and track, and then you go to UConn in track. I would have expected that you might have gone to UConn for basketball because of the reputation. Oh, only because of the reputation you've established. But you decided to go to UConn for track. So what led you to commit to track for college, and what led you to UConn?
Well, just getting out of the Minnesota, Midwest, states, I wanted to venture out and kind of start something new. My parents always said, go somewhere else so that you don't live, you can always come home for the holidays, but go somewhere where you're going to learn, to be independent, to be an adult. But UConn was just, it felt homey, felt like a family. They embraced me well. I was the fastest coming in, but that was fine because I still had competition on the team. So I know everybody thought I was going to play basketball at UConn. They're like, we don't see you on the court. I'm like, because I'm not. But just being offered 5 years, that was kind of like the seal of the deal for me for track. Just being able to come out of school debt free is really important. That was what my parents stressed the most. Like, hey, go to school on a full scholarship, but don't come out with any debt. That's what you need, especially starting out as an adult and going into pro athlete life. So.
And if I remember correctly, you got a car out of it too.
I did.
I know you love sharing that part. And that wasn't just you, it was all of your family, your younger sister Elise, your brother. That was the edict that your parents put out there. Like, if you get a D1 scholarship, we're going to give you. So it's like, how cool is that? You don't have to go on The Price is Right or Wheel of Fortune to try to win a vehicle. You got one as a validation or as a reward for getting a Division I scholarship, a reward for your investment. That's really what it was. You invested a lot of time and energy, and you got quite a payoff out of it.
So me and my mom made a bet. before the state championship, like the day before finals for track. And she's like, hey, if you go out there and you run PR, maybe run the state title, which I did. So I have a state record, 1171, you get a scholarship. So that's all I needed to hear. Oh, I go out there and win, I'm getting a car. So as soon as I crossed the line, I point to my mom, I'm like, you're getting me that car, right?
And she was true to her word, and I respect that because that says a lot about fostering great relationships,
Mm-hmm.
both as a family, as a friend, all of that. So take us back to that moment. You won 4 team titles, if I'm correct, and you still hold the state record in the 100 meters with that 1171, which you've since bested. As a track athlete, and this is something I've always been curious about. I know a lot of basketball athletes who cross over into track. A lot of the Hopkins athletes, both in boys and girls basketball, took up that. And another friend of mine who just committed to Minnesota, Nia Holloway, does the same thing.
Okay.
What goes into building up the speed that you have? Because I've always been fascinated at folks like yourself, or when I watched the Olympics, Usain Bolt. I was a little young for the Kersey, the Joyner Kersey family, although I heard a lot about them, but I got to see Usain Bolt. Of course, he was always fun to watch. And especially when he would win his races, and then it looked like he could still keep on going. Like he'd win the 100 meters and he's still hustling, like, or the 400 meters where it's the combination of sprint and endurance, and it's a struggle to get to the finish line, but it's still just as competitive. What goes into building up that speed, maintaining it? How do you become so fast?
Just trusting in not only Hopkins, but in trusting in my dad. He was the key factor in me, me and my sister, and a lot of other athletes that you've seen on different teams running fast at state championships. We probably had like 12 athletes at states just from our AAU team, Track Minnesota Elite. So my dad does a good job offsetting not only our Hopkins training, but also our AAU training. So just giving us that different base training and strength on top of what we have to do at practice for Hopkins. So that really made a difference. And, my parents get us trainers, everything that we need. We're rehabbing, we're going to ice, we're going to the chiropractor. So they believed in my dream just as much as I did, which is important.
You mentioned the 1171 you got as a junior and the team titles. How excited were you in that race when you were mentioned? I think you said that junior year, that's when colleges are really looking to recruit the next crop of athletes. So when you needed to perform in the clutch, I would say you exceeded it. But when you finished that event and then you saw 11.71, still a state record, what was your reaction?
It was like finally I broke the barrier. I was been running 11.9 all year, 11.8, and I finally just broke the barrier. And that's the time that I needed to, get put on the map and be able to accept all these offers from different schools, being able to have a wide variety of options to go to for school. So that just opened so many doors and kind of leveled me up to the next, to college, being able to run against the top tier athletes in the country. So that was like an amazing feeling. And then being able to come back and double in the 2 and then the 4x1 and then winning a state championship on top of that, it was an amazing day.
And mentally, how do you approach that? Because as you noted, most times you're not specializing in one event. You have your specialty, but it's not like you focus on one race. The sprinters usually do the 100, 200, the relays. You might see them in the 400, and then the distance athletes, you'll see them in the 1600, 3200. So you mentioned getting the state record, probably one of the most exciting moments you ever had as a high school athlete. But then you had to focus for the next race because, as you were touching on, you were still competing for a state title. So you couldn't get too caught up in the moment because you had to get out there and do it again.
So just being able to double and do different events, because I used to high jump and long jump at the state meet as well on top of sprinting and trying to get back to my events. You just have to practice maintaining, not only rehabbing your body, but running when your body is not at 100%. So being able to like stress manage, so you stress adapt at practice, you make practice harder than your race. So by the time you get to the race, you got this, you've already done this. Your legs may feel like sandbags, running around this curve, but you know that you practice your legs like this. So just being able to stress manage at the meet is important.
What you said reminded me of the Hopkins basketball practices too, that Brian Cosgriff, as you call him, Coach Cos, would do. And the idea, his athletes have told me as much, and followers said, make practice hard so that the meets or the games are fun. And it sounds like you took that same attitude into track.
Very much so. Just being able to, adapt from practice because you're going hard. We had a whole day for defense with Coach Cos, 3-hour practice of just straight defense drills, boxing out, going up against Erin O'Toole, trying to box her out. She's 6'4", I'm 5'6", 5'7". So just having that mentality of, got to go hard every day, grind hard because, the reward is going to be that much more better.
And while my track knowledge is limited, I do remember seeing you at the state meet, I think in 2013. I was working with Grant Stadium at the time when they had the rights to the meets. And so I got to see an extension of what I would call a friendly rivalry between you and Phyllis Webb. I think it was the 100 meters. Well, you, of course, played against each other in basketball. And in one case, for the right to win a state championship in 2012. And then you do the same thing in track. But I remember, and this is why I call it a friendly rivalry, I think you ran the 100 and then you might have tweaked something or...
Oh, yeah, that was the 200. It was the 200. And you and I had to strain calf that season. Oh. So I ran on a strained calf, track has its injuries, but you got to run through them. But yeah, she picked me up off the track because, I just took a whole face dive. Everybody I've never heard the track so quiet. Like everybody's just super quiet. She picks me up off the ground, gives me a piggyback ride over to the training table. So that's my girl. Me and Phyllis actually played at Farview together. So she was part of some of those championships too. Alina Starr, we had a lot of people that went to different schools. She went to De La Salle. So.
And it's cool to see all of them make a name for themselves. I know Alina Starr went down to Atlanta and is now developing a career in sports with marketing management. Phyllis, I know, actually joined a women's football team that...
Oh, wow.
The Minnesota Vixen, if I remember. Well, cool. She joined them and then their season was canceled due to the pandemic. But I remember that moment and I think I got a shot of it. I don't know if you have a tape of that or not, because we were recording it for the Grand Stadium airwaves and I'm running this robotic camera. And so I just remember cutting to Phyllis picking you up and giving you a ride back because I thought it was a really cool moment that two rivals, but as you alluded to, it's an extended family. Everybody knows everybody, whether it's the AAU or the Farview or going against people in track and basketball. So to see Phyllis, an athlete you were competing against for all those years in different sports, come over and say, all right, I'll give you a lift back to the camp. Is that a moment you two still talk about whenever you get a chance to reunite?
Yeah, it's funny because my mom printed out the picture. So I have the picture on my wall here in Florida. But that was just a defining moment in our friendship. Like, even though we're, enemies on the track, we're still going to be friends after the race. So, and we've known each other for so long. It's like, girl, if you win, you win. If I win, you win. So we're all going to win. They went out and won the 4x2 right after the 200. So... So she's dominant in track, very sure. She was another two-sport athlete that I definitely respected.
I think I was laughing for a solid minute, not because of your injury, obviously, but it's like, yeah, it was like one of those moments, as Al Michaels would say, you can't make this up.
Right.
But that's funny. You still have that photo, and the next time the two of you meet, I could see that, 50 years from now, you're still going to go back to that moment.
Most definitely.
But if I remember too, she won that race.
Yes, she did.
Well, and you had the strained calf, and now that makes sense. But her first reaction wasn't, "Oh, I got the win." It's, "Oh, my friends are. I better give her a lift." How tough was that race and that season where you had to compete? I think you had the college scholarship locked in by that point, but you're having to go out there again. So a year after you set state records that still stand, you're having to grind out another state meet with a strained calf. As you said, you have to run through it, but I'm guessing that wasn't enjoyable.
No, with track, it's kind of hard to maintain running through injuries or playing through injuries like you would do with basketball or football or a different sport. Because with track, you have to go 100% the whole time. You're putting your body to the full max. You're maxing out completely. So being able to do that multiple times in a day, running on relays, running at the end of the meet, and just having to be on your feet or moving around for 4 hours straight it takes a toll on the body, but practice makes sure that you're good to go, even though your legs are dead.
And how do you maintain that speed, that velocity? I know we kind of touched on this before,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not as simple as just going out there and running a straight line. You mentioned all the training that goes into it, and the muscle strength in there as well, so that you can get a quick acceleration and maintain that speed. Because 100 meters, 11.71, or I think 11.47 was one of your best. I don't know what your PR is. So it happens in a matter of seconds, but
Mm-hmm.
100 meters is a lot longer than the time would suggest.
Oh, most definitely. So my PR now is 11:40, and for a 100-meter runner, you have to break it up into 4 different races. So you have the dry phase, you have your dry phase into your acceleration, and then you have the critical zone, which is the last 25% of your race. So you have to break it up into 4 different races for us. So you would want to run more 70 meters than 100. My coach always says you want to run 7 steps for 10 or 7 strides for 10 meters. For women, it'd be like 8 for 10. So that's our goal, because that's what Bolt runs. Bolt runs six strides for 10 meters. That's why he's running the fastest time in the world. So we're looking at the science behind track. We're applying that as well.
And it's a good reminder. This is what I always got out of sports. Folks might mock us sports fans as jocks per se, but it's like, no, there's a lot of math and science that go into it. So like, really, it's a sport for nerds too, because of all the math you get to well, you talk about your PRs and you can see like, okay, this is what I did. You can watch your runs. How did I get 11:40? Well, this is what I did.
Right.
And how did your parents help foster your growth? Your father, of course, a professional football player for a season. How many players get to say that? Or people, I should say, in their lifetime. Your mother competed in track, if I remember right. So they both had a lot of experience as athletes. Your father actually getting a chance to experience life as a professional the way you are now in track. How do you think that helped foster your growth, having 2 parents you could go to who could speak from experience?
Well, they already placed it in me when I was born. DNA is very important. But them just being super supportive, of all our goals and whatever sport we wanted to do, gymnastics, dance, they're dropping us off, picking us up, making sure that we have all the right equipment. So most importantly, they're our support. Without them, I wouldn't be here where I am now. So both my parents, my mom ran track at the U, and so did my dad. That's where they met, of course. But just having that dynamic of, okay, we're athletes in this family. If you don't want to be an athlete, that's okay. But if you are going to be an athlete, you have to put your full 100% into it.
And then all 3 of them, of course, all 3 of their kids became athletes. Another interesting note with track and field, and I had a few friends who I met either later on or when I was in school who were track athletes. There's an indoor and outdoor season. It's not what you're accustomed to if you're one of those 4-year fans when you watch in the Olympics, because it's all outdoors. So what are the differences between indoor and outdoor meets, and what are some other moments or stories that you remember from your time as a UConn track athlete?
For indoor, it was a little different for me coming from Minnesota, because, we don't have indoor. I played basketball in the winter. So just that change was, big in my life, because now I'm just focusing on track completely. But indoor is a little different. It's kind of hard to breathe indoor compared to, outside there's trees, creates the atmosphere and the ozone. But for indoor, you have to run on a bank track, which is, if you never ran on a bank track before, you feel like you're tipping over like the whole time you're running, especially if you're in the blocks, you're up on the curve. So it's banked. So you've already feel like you're falling over before they even start the race. But you just have to know how to maneuver indoor. Make sure that you're running uphill and make sure your legs aren't behind you if you're coming down the bank, because you can fall over. That is very possible just by the way that the track is designed. But for outdoor, I love it. I love, having the wind run through my hair, or, just being around, in the sun. Love it. It's very important for sprinters. You have to have our muscles very warm. Distance runners aren't very friendly with the warm weather, but sprinters like to have warm weather because, we're running at such a higher velocity and higher speed. So it's harder. Easier to pull, hamstrings and things like that.
And no matter the setting, you had a lot of success at UConn. I was looking at the number of first place finishes you got at both indoor and outdoor. You were a gold medalist at the American conference meet. Of course, now they're going back to the Big East, so who knows what might have been. But still, I mean, hey, whoever the competition is, you still came out in first. So, you got to put in the work no matter who. But what do you remember most fondly about that experience, getting several gold medals, both in indoor and outdoor events? And how do you think that validated your decision to go to college for track?
Just being able to be versatile, both indoor and outdoor, because they're different distances, especially in the 60 compared to the 100. If you don't have a good start in the 60, then the race is over. It's a blink, 6 seconds long. So for the 100, you have time to get up and start running. But the 200 indoor is a little weird because it's a lap, so it kind of like psychs you out a little bit because you're not used to running, a full lap on the track. So for outdoor, it's just half. So it's kind of like a mental thing indoor. Just make sure your breathing is okay, because you definitely will be tired, more tired than indoor. And, the times are more equivalent or slower indoor because, it's not a 400-meter track. So.
You talked about the family you built with your fellow UConn athletes, and I'm guessing you went to a lot of basketball games.
Yes.
But for you, what was the culture like? Because kind of like Hopkins, where of course you made a name for yourself in basketball, but track was your favorite sport, or the one you really were gunning for in terms of a scholarship or opportunities. Same thing. You go from one dynasty to another with basketball. Track, of course, gets a lot of respect, but not the following that basketball does. So what was that like, going to a school? I think you said earlier, you mentioned going to UConn.
Yes.
A lot of folks thought you were going for basketball. I remember either you telling me or reading somewhere that you were going for track. So I was aware you were going to go to UConn for another sport, which again, is still an accomplishment, still worthy of celebration. But there was kind of a hidden benefit where you didn't have to worry about being a big celebrity on campus compared to your girls like Dangerfield or Collier or Stewie. And they handle it well. We've seen that.
Yes.
But UConn track, not quite as notorious as UConn basketball. What was that like?
The stress wasn't there. We went out and performed and won multiple championships while I was there. We won 3 there while I was there. So the stress wasn't there, but they knew, track got respect because we're out here winning championships. Obviously, if we weren't good, we wouldn't be bringing home trophies and big rings and things like that. So we definitely got a lot of respect because they know that our track workouts are way harder than the basketball ones.
Did you ever invite any of the basketball players to do a track workout, or were they like, nah, we'll pass?
Yeah, they knew better. They already seen us because, the track is right next to Gamble. It's right on the other side. So them walking from their practice, they can see exactly what we're doing. So they know better. They'll come to all our track meets because we come to their games. So very supportive and athletic ground. Everybody goes to everybody's games. Soccer, baseball, lacrosse. They wanted me to actually play field hockey. Nancy, the head coach over there, she's like, what sport do you play? I was like, oh, I run track. She's like, oh, that means you're fast. She's like, you think you want to come try out for the field hockey team? I was like, I've never even heard of field hockey or played it in my life.
Had you mentioned some of the activities, and when you said field hockey, it's funny how you are getting all of these offers or interests to compete in these events, but I think that speaks to your versatility and your commitment to persevering. I remember reading you did gymnastics. You mentioned that earlier. You tried out karate. How many sports or activities did you test the waters in before you settled on
Uh,
basketball and track?
it lost count, but a lot, basketball, track, football. I played football for a little bit, flag football, cheerleading, dance. I did dance for 10 years professionally, which really helps with your footwork in basketball. My mom was super set in stone, like, hey, you got to double if you're going to do basketball, you got to do dance with it. So just setting that base for me as a kid and being able to put me in positions where I could be successful was definitely a goal for my parents.
It just didn't help with the traveling calls.
That's all turnovers.
Oh, that's going to be the one thing I remember most from this interview. Oh, she got called for traveling. What?
Very much.
No, I tease, of course, because obviously your positives outweigh the negatives. But kind of like how your fellow athletes went pro in basketball and with Stewie and Collier and Dangerfield, and I could see them having lengthy careers. Well, Stewie already, she's doing what Maya Moore did, and having to do it coming back from an Achilles injury after the 2018 season is just remarkable. Yeah. But you decided to turn pro in track and field. For those who aren't in the know, because it's not like going pro in basketball or football like your father did, or volleyball where you compete with teams. What led you to decide to turn pro in track, and what is that process? What is that experience like? Because it's not like you sign up for a team the same way you would in football or basketball, hockey or baseball, but as we've seen, you still have gotten some opportunities out of it. So what is the process of becoming a professional track and field athlete?
Well, first you have to find an agent that would be most ideal for you. Especially if you want to be able to compete overseas, which is where a lot of the money is won. Most of the Diamond League meets are over there. So all the meets that are televised usually are international meets, unless it's, the Olympics or USA Worlds or IAAF Worlds. So being a pro athlete, you have to know which meets to go to, and being able to get into those meets, just having a fast time. It's really everything is about running fast, of course. Just being able to put yourself on a different stage with the top athletes in the world, like Shelly Ann Frazier or Tori Bowie or Carmelita Jeter. I've gotten a chance to compete against all of them just in my short 3 years of here being in Florida. So me going up against the top athletes, I know that I'm in the right position with not only my coach, but with my training as well. And being able to, get ready for the Olympics and hopefully make it.
What is that experience? What is that atmosphere like going from high school and college where you were probably the top runner, setting a lot of records, setting PRs, still holding a state record. And you're telling me, in your 3 years since turning pro, you've gone up against the likes of Carmelita Jeter, and I know there's a few more track athletes are on the tip of my tongue, but I don't follow it as much as you do. Do you remember the first time you went up against some of those notable names who have Olympic experience, who picked up medals, who have set the bar? What was that like for you?
So my first time going up some big talent was at Pepsi Florida Relays, which is at the UF in Gainesville, University of Florida. Just in the 100 meters, it's called the Olympic Development. So they put you, where your time is ranked. So I was in the first heat, and I get in the blocks, and I'm next to the top 5 sprinters in the U.S. basically for women's 100. So in that moment, I knew exactly this is exactly where I needed to be. This is where all my training and all my, my hard days of practice, this is where it's gotten me. So just being able to run against them, knowing that I'm not only a track and field athlete, but I'm a professional.
Where did you finish in that first heat against those big names?
I think I finished 4th, which is a pretty good landmark for me, knowing that, coming off an unhealthy season and being healthy this season just kind of puts a light in my eye for me, because, I have a different training partner this year and one of the top training or 100-meter runners in the world. So just having the opportunity, train with the best. You train with the best, you be the best. That's what my dad always says. So
Fourth place, not bad. So anybody wondering, like, does she belong out there? It's like, yeah, that's really cool though, that you were able to get a respectable finish, and just making that field, of course, is a big accomplishment in its own right. And this might seem like a silly question. I'm sure you get this a lot, but what led you to settle on this goal of qualifying for the Summer Olympics?
it's always been a goal. Just coming up and running track, that I've always seen, different athletes, both pro and collegiate athletes training, getting ready for the Olympic trials, which is held in Eugene, Oregon, obviously at University of Oregon. So just being able to get to that point in my life and be able to be on that stage with other athletes and be like a professional and earn money, that was really my goal. It's always been a goal to go to the Olympics. Everybody's always expected that from me. Growing up as a kid, running at Hopkins, running for UConn. So people always expected me, but it's always been my goal. It's something I've always worked for. So now that I have a chance to do it, I'm really excited, especially this year.
What does it take to get to that level? Of course, you have the Olympic trials that you have to compete in, that you have to qualify for, I imagine. But when your trainers and when everyone who learned that you wanted to make the Olympics, what was their reaction, and how have they helped you get that opportunity to perhaps make a spot on the team?
Just the support. Not even just knowing that I can make the Olympics, but just seeing that how far my talent has carried me over the past years. And, people have followed me since AAU through high school to UConn. So them just being on the path and being able to support me and always being there when I need them is really big for athletes, just to have that base, that bond, that family bond, even if they aren't family.
We talked before we started the podcast on how your training had to go on pause with the pandemic. We don't know what the status of the Olympics will look like. They're hoping to have it next year. We'll have to see how things are as far as containment of the virus. But what would that mean for you if you're able to make it to the trials, get a spot on the team? How cool would that be?
Oh man, that's a lifelong dream for me. Like, I think I would start busting out in tears, because it just is like a goal. Like, once you reach your goal and you just feel so, confirmed in life, like, yes, I did it. Okay, now what's next? So just having that, like, oh yeah, as soon as I get to the Olympics, I'm gonna get the rings tatted, because why not?
Okay, so a little less grand perhaps than a car, but if you make the Olympics, you're going to get the rings tatted on somewhere. I'm like, have you figured out where yet, or are you waiting?
I don't know. We'll see.
Okay, so you're not getting too far ahead of yourself.
Yes.
That's probably a good idea. And I presume you would compete for the United States. I know with the way citizenship works, some athletes who maybe grew up here can compete for other countries, but it sounds like you're settled on the Stars and Stripes if you're able to.
Oh yeah.
Now, of course, they competed in different sports, but did you get a chance to perhaps talk to Stewie or Maya or others who have had the opportunity to compete in the Olympics from your school?
Oh yeah, I've definitely talked to Stewie. Stewie was there while I was there. So she was a senior while I was a junior. So I got to see her play and, win the 3 titles. I was there for the women's and the men's title. That was my freshman or sophomore year. So, just seeing that type of high caliber athlete just kind of puts, more hopes for me. Like, I want to be on the same stage as them. So
what is the biggest challenge with being a professional track and field athlete? And what is the most gratifying part about having that on your resume?
Staying motivated, if you don't have any meets going on, and just being able to stay motivated with your eating, your dietary restrictions, keeping that same weight, or because you have to carry around your full body weight on the track, which is important. So you can't be too heavy or too light, or being able to manage your body and not cause injuries while you're running is probably the most important thing for most pro athletes. Just body management.
And it goes back to with motivation and getting your name out there, the branding, the work that you're doing. What led you to start up this entrepreneurial enterprise, and how do you see that developing whenever you decide to hang up the cleats?
So me and my dad, well, my dad and my mom, they're both entrepreneurs. My mom has a catering company, and my dad, obviously, he has a track program. He has multiple different businesses. So just growing up and seeing that my parents, they mostly work from home, is something I wanted to do. I don't want to work a 9 to 5 because I'm an athlete. So it's just hard for me to get to 9 to 5, go to practice and come back and then work all day and be on my feet. So I had to find something that could create a revenue, especially when I'm done with track. So this is setting me up for when I'm done, running or being an athlete or competing. Just opening different doors for me and being able to network with other athletes and other entrepreneurs in my field. And then building my social media has really been really important for me. Just being able to get more sponsors and putting my name out there and becoming verified so it can be notable on Instagram.
And what is that process like? Because my Instagram following is kind of sad compared to yours, but I might have been a little too old to really embrace it the way yourself and Paige and Jalen Suggs, Chet Holmgren. I've noticed a lot of younger athletes have larger followings, but Instagram is one of the most common platforms, where Twitter and Facebook were still developing when I was in college. So it's just funny to think how much has changed. But what is that process like? And on a related note, how many sponsorship offers have you picked up since you've focused on self branding?
So for self branding, growing from 3,000 to 14,000, it was a process, obviously, but being able to, get over 10K, I was able to use a swipe up feature. So I went to starting creating my website for my TRA fitness, not only that, but my PR and my social media marketing. So being able to do all that was cool.
One of the themes we've talked about is that feeling of family that you've built, whether it was at Hopkins on the basketball court or on the track at UConn. Even though you were a track athlete,
Mhm.
you have this bond with several big names in basketball, and I'm sure you have that family with track too. How is that sense of family, that support, what would you make of it, where you speak highly of Nia Coffey and Sydney and Brianna Williams and Michaela Shackelford, and getting to mentor, as we said earlier, getting to set the stage for folks like Nia Holly and TT Starks who came after you. And then you go to UConn, you get to build another family with
Mhm.
Crystal Dangerfield, Nafisa Colley, or Brianna Stewart. You mentioned Mariah Jefferson, Bon Bon, I think is her nickname.
Yep, that's
Like,
it.
like, how heartwarming is it to know that you have two sets of families that came from big name schools, big name talents, but you can get a hold of any of them and it sounds like you can catch up. They're there for you, you're there for them. What would you make of that connection?
It's important, of course, to have a family bond. Um, just having, having a base over at UConn and at Hopkins is important because uh, you're there alone, especially me coming from Minnesota. Just having, friends and family that, you know, I don't get to see all the time because, UConn is far from Minnesota. It's 5, 6 hour flight. So having that family, that bond, being able to come to games, my parents may not make every track or any meets and things like that or here in Florida. Just having that support, they follow along, they watch our live streams for the track. So just having that bond is important.
And then you, of course, move even further away to South Florida. It makes sense as far as training because you don't have to worry about cold weather like you do up here. But what are some of the challenges that come with it, and what have you enjoyed most about training, competing, and building up your resume in Florida?
Um, Here it's different because it's all year round. You know, we don't see snow. It may get a little bit colder, but the training atmosphere is usually warm. That's important, especially for sprinting or any running events that you're going to do. But just being here in Florida, you know, puts me in a different position because all the top athletes train here in Florida, either here or on the West Coast in Arizona or Cali. So our basic meets or our regular meets are shown with top athletes in Team USA that are going to be competing in the Olympics. So you get to run against the top tier athletes right here in Florida, Central Florida at that, right here in Orlando. So being able to see those different talents and just being able to go to some of the meets that aren't, you know, high pressure, high stressful situations and being able to create a fast time to run against the top tier best, it's something that you won't see anywhere else. I'll tell you that.
Now, for the next question, you can take it any direction you'd like. If you want to choose a moment from both sports, you can, or overall, I'll let you answer this the way you see fit. But what would you say throughout your athletic career, high school, college, pro, at any moment, what was the most exciting moment and what was the most embarrassing moment?
The most exciting, ooh, that's a hard one. I would say my most exciting moment. This is just not even me running track. This is just me being at school at UConn. It's the girls and the men's basketball both winning back-to-back championships. Just having like every student ever that goes to the university all in one place, like 20,000 students, just one place. You know, we didn't go to class for 2 weeks, you know. There was damage to the campus. Like it was amazing. Like it's something I've never experienced. But my most hardest moment would be probably dropping the baton at a high school meet and then, you know, losing the relay. That's like the worst. When you drop the baton, you have 3 other people depending on you. So that was hard.
I forgot, yes, with the Final Four, of course, people get to go and they get the big student body. And it's funny that you picked that moment. Of course, you're used to winning championships or being at schools who get that experience, but you're right to do the double. I think Hopkins did that. I can't remember when they last did that. I know in 2019 they did.
Mhm.
And I think the boys and the girls, maybe it was 2011 where they did the double. Of course, you were playing in
Yeah.
one of them, so you couldn't just go as a
Yeah.
fan. But how cool was that to go to the Final Four, but you got to be a fan this time? You didn't have to worry about the lights and the cameras and the audience and having 70,000 people in the case of the men. And the women, of course, drew big crowds too, but there was no pressure, no stress involved with executing on the floor. You just got to be a fan and cheer as loudly as you wanted.
Well, I still have those butterflies in my step because, you know, UConn is a winning nature. So anything less than that, you know, it makes everybody nervous. So everybody, there's a target on UConn's back. So everybody wants us to lose. So I have all my friends from different schools, you know, messaging me saying UConn's going to lose. And I'm like, yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
I've learned over the years to never bet against UConn, even in the years. I remember when Mississippi State knocked them off in the
Ooh,
semis,
yes.
and I don't bring that up to as a bad memory, but that was the year, of course, when Stewie and Jefferson and I think Kalina Mosquito Lewis all graduated, got drafted, and Gino was saying, "Oh, we might lose this year," and folks are going like, "Yeah, right," because they were trouncing everybody, and then Mississippi State beats them. We're like, "What?" But I remember him saying to his players, like the moment you're experiencing now is what we have done to so many schools over the years. He said what we have accomplished with that winning streak of over 100 games, not losing, kind of like Hopkins. I don't think you went undefeated the way Paige did in 2019, but he said this isn't normal. So it's almost like a reminder that, yeah, you will have a setback at some point. It doesn't feel like it. And of course, in track, it doesn't work that way per se, because you're not going up against, it's not a dual meet. So it's not like you have a win-loss record. But what was that experience like where you go from a school in Hopkins where you were winning all the time, and you certainly did a lot of winning at UConn, but kind of like many other athletes, whether they go from UConn to the pros or when they go from Hopkins to these Division I schools, with Nia going to Northwestern and the other Nia going to Michigan State, and Layla going to Hampton, for example, and Williams, I think she went to Binghamton. What is that transition like?
The transition is, I mean, it's, you know, it's a little weird, but you get used to it. You kind of adjust to it once you get out of high school. You know, you have that summer to get ready and get ready for whatever you're going to go do, whether it's basketball. You know, you have to report early to campus. So you're already there before school even starts, which is, you know, it's cool because you get to focus on your sport for a little bit before you start academics. But the transition from UConn to pro life, it was just kind of automatic for me because I knew I just wasn't done. I know I had more in the gas tank for me to put out there. So I brought my talents to Florida.
And we've covered a lot of ground, but if anyone were to ask you, and you can take this in any direction that you would like, what would you say is the most unusual fact about yourself? And that could be hobbies, interests, activities, fun stories, something that people wouldn't necessarily know about you right away.
Ooh, that's a hard one. You put me on the spot. Let's see. Unusual. I like to go to the gun range.
And when did you take up that hobby?
I moved to Florida.
When you moved to Florida.
Yeah. There's a lot of them here.
Taylor, remind me never to tick you off. No, I tease, but no, that I've actually got a sibling who does that. I know some other friends of mine who, after they moved out of Minnesota, started picking that up, and it's like, and even some friends who moved back to Minnesota have done that as well. And it's like, okay, you know, that's it's not my first activity, and I have my reasons. None of it political per se, and I'll get to that another time. But if that is something that you want to take up, it's like, all right, I would not have expected that. The best I can do is my photographic memory of fonts. Like, I can memorize, no, seriously, I can memorize fonts. So when I'm watching,
no way.
Yeah. So when I'm watching broadcasts, when I watch the Olympics, or when I'm watching basketball, I can pick out, in fact, I could, if I wanted to, recreate several graphic templates from the networks.
Wow.
To have these lifelong friends from two esteemed schools, two esteemed programs, basketball, track. What would you make of that journey where you have set out and accomplished a lot? You have turned this passion of yours, coming out of the womb running, and made a name for yourself. That has to be something you reflect on fondly, I imagine.
Yeah, you know, for me, it's just me living in each moment, you know, never taking things for granted, you know, never getting like too big headed with track, or ever feeling like you know, I'm the best, because I always know there's going to be somebody faster than me that's going to be, especially in pro, you know, there's always going to be somebody faster than you that's running the world record. So you just have to remain humble, you know, live in each moment. And for me, I kind of go with the flow. I just kind of go with what's best for me. And that's how I've been successful in these past years, not only in high school, but in college and now in pro life.
And early in this conversation, you talked about running camps for the likes of Paige and Layla Chacolis and Najee and Amaya Battle. And I don't know if you worked with Taylor Woodson or Nunu Agara, but I'm going, man, this Hopkins, they just keep reloading. How would you say you've grown as a role model? I don't know how many folks come up to you now, but you got a taste of it when you were running camps for the next generation of Hopkins athletes. And now more people who hear your story, whether it's through your brand marketing or through your athletic accomplishments, how has that led you to become a role model in your own right?
So just growing up, my parents are, I should say, my parents always wanted us to be role models, always have something to give back. So for us, it's always giving back to not only our church, to our AAU team, to, our basketball teams, coming to the meets, bringing snacks, things like that. So that role model was already in me, just being instilled in me since I was younger, because that's all my parents know, giving back is way important. But just, having that instilled in you at a young age kind of creates such an amazing adult and a role model, a leader, especially for me, because I was point guard on the team. So I had to be a leader, I had to call the plays, I'm captain. So me mentoring the younger girls and seeing them blossom and be state championships is like the most exciting thing. That's what I get out of it. The joy, giving back is part of the joy. You're not getting anything back, but those kids are getting scholarships to different schools. They're going out and creating their own paths. So hopefully they get back, and Hopkins is like a generational thing. So each generation is giving back to each generation. And everybody comes back for the state championship games, the section games, and they show their support. They send cards, videos, all types of stuff. So even if you weren't there during their time, you're part of the Hopkins family, so your family.
Something I noted in the Hopkins games I've done recently is that sense of family and connection, like you said, because when everyone was gushing over Paige Bueckers, and understandably so, she is a really superb athlete. I saw her put some moves. There was a no-look dish that was amazing. Unfortunately, Amaya Battle missed the layup, and then Paige gave her a hard time about it when I did the post game, because I usually would have someone join Paige, because that was who Paige was. She never wanted to make it about herself, but I'll never forget that quip. She's like, "Why'd you bring out Amaya? She cost me an assist," on a night where she had a double-double in points and assists. I'm like, you did all right. But I said how so many folks were looking up to Paige. I noted, well, Paige had that 2016 group to look up to, because she joined varsity as an 8th grader in Nia Holly and Ashley Bates. And Ashley,
yep.
I want to get her name in there too, because she was Big South Player of the Year, I think, as a junior.
Oh yeah,
so she wasn't too shabby either.
Oh yeah.
And Nia and I have joked about her illustrious career where she scored a total of 400 points. She joked about peaking in high school, but she doesn't have any regrets about it. And we're of course close friends, and it has nothing to do with the stat sheet. But Paige had Ashley and Nia to look up to. Those two had yourself, Nia Coffey, to look up to. And I know the three-peat didn't happen until you got there, but I imagine as you were making your way up through camps, whether it was those 04 or 06 teams, or even players who weren't a part of that, you and Nia Coffey had athletes you looked up to as well.
That's correct. That's true.
Who were some of those athletes, if you don't mind me asking, that you wanted to be like?
We had the Brianna Williams, the Julia Weimers, the Gracia Hudsons. Even the teams that we played against, my 8th grade year, we played at Hopkins. We played against Rachel Banham, and she was killing us. And then we came back to win the game. It was the breakdown tournament. So that was like our big first win that set up the season that year. So, Jackie from Eden Prairie, just so many like great athletes that we played against when I was younger. So seeing them go on to different schools is like, okay, this is my goal.
As we get close to wrapping this up, as hard as it might be to believe, how hard was that decision where you had two options? You mentioned track was your first love, but you would have had an opportunity to go D1 in basketball. Of course, you have plenty of D1 offers in track. How many athletes can say they got offers from both sports?
That was probably the hardest decision that I ever had to make in my life till this day. Just picking which sport I was going to be successful in, and will carry me to the next level. So just, it really helped me when I went on my visits to see, because I went some for basketball and for track, but you only have so many official visits. So I had to take a couple unofficials, but just once I found the school, I was like, okay, this is where I want to be. This is what I want to do. But my parents definitely told me it's going to be the hardest decision of my life. And I didn't want to make it, because I was still young. You're still young. You're 17, 18. You got to make the biggest decision of your life. So whether to play basketball or track. So I just had to really, sleep on it, pray on it. And then it came out to be track.
And in your case, there was that added degree of difficulty because for most athletes, it's what school am I going to attend? In your case, it's not only what school do I have to go to, what sport am I going to compete in? Because the
Right.
way the D1 schedule pans
Hmm.
out, you can't really do both. I think you would have done well if you had that
Yeah.
opportunity. And I'm not saying that to butter your bread. It's just from my experience watching you as an athlete. But I'm guessing you lost a little bit of sleep going back and forth between two sports and all these schools
Yes.
that just wanted you to be a part of their program.
Especially before signing day, because you had to get all of your stuff ready before signing day. So I'm like, oh, everybody's like, what school are you going to? And I kind of kept it a secret. And then signing day came, so I committed. It was awesome though.
And earlier we spoke of your most exciting and embarrassing moments as an athlete. What would you say was a favorite or funny moment, a moment that stands out to you, whether it was your Hopkins buddies or your UConn buddies? Answer this any way you'd like, but what are some of your favorite moments that symbolize the friendships that you've built that last to this day?
Um, Probably going out to our first soccer game. I never went to soccer, but our soccer team was actually pretty good. We won that year. So just going out to the soccer game and experiencing something new, going to hockey games, just going to different games that I've never like been to or had any interest in going to. But going out to the bars, of course. Having fun on the weekends, between balancing track and partying and being social and going to school it was hard, but it was fun because I made so many friends and different athletes on the way. So I would say just having that bond, not only in high school, but in college as well. And here in pro, you may be separate here in pro and you're not on a team, but you still get to bond with the people that you train with. So just taking that bonding and having that family support is really important for me in my success.
I only hope you were behaving yourself, Taylor, when you went out to the bars as a college student.
Very much so.
Because as you know, with the D1 athletes, especially, there's a lot of scrutiny.
Yeah,
And
it is.
maybe you can talk about that a little bit. It's a little different in track, but it's something, and I give athletes props for handling it the way they do. And it's something you don't really appreciate until you cover sports the way I do now, because I was once a fan and kind of got caught up in the wins and losses.
Mhm.
But when you start covering sports and learning about the athletes, hearing all these stories like the ones we've been sharing over the last couple of hours, there's more to it than the win-loss record and the stat
Mhm.
sheet. But as you can attest to with all of the championships UConn won, and then that shocker of not getting to play in the championship in 2017 when Morgan
Mhm.
Williams hits that jumper and knocks him out. It's one of those things where if you're not number one, you're a bum. That's the saying. So when you're on top, everyone wants to be friends. They want to
Right.
congratulate you. When you're not, folks get antsy. And the last couple of years, UConn, they've had some, well,
Mhm.
for them, down years, which for anyone else would be a good year. Now, of course, Paige
Right.
Bueckers and AZ Fudd are going to join the program. That didn't surprise me. Those two are
Me
buddies, but
neither.
they figured to be contenders again, and they probably will as
Mhm.
long as Gino's coaching. But psychologically, what is that like? How do you make sure it doesn't get to you where you have this pressure to compete and do well, but at the same time, you're still human. You still go out. You like to dance. You like to have fun. I remember hearing all the noodles gatherings you had at Hopkins, for example. I'm sure you had your go-to places at UConn,
Oh yeah.
but that's a lot of weight you have to carry. And sometimes I think we forget that these are young adults that want to be seen as more than just athletes. You want to be seen as
Yes.
more than somebody who could run really fast.
Mhm. Also for us, athletes, they already expect you, they see you at practice, they see you going to meets, they see you missing class from Wednesday to Sunday. So they understand that you're an athlete. You know, teachers do kind of give you a hard time because you're missing so much class, but they don't understand that being an athlete, you have to travel. So whether you're basketball, football, track, they other students would see you as, you know, special treatment because, you know, you have to come in and get the notes from the teacher or things like that, or make up a different test or something like that. So just getting the scrutiny from the different students, not understanding our schedule and what we have to go through during a regular week, 40-hour week. You know, we have study hall, practice. On top of that, we have class and have to maintain our social life. So balance was really important for me and all my friends. Of course, you know, we went out and partied, but we also did our work and went to practice on time. So balancing that, you know, not taking any scrutiny from the teachers and just doing your work and getting your stuff put in on time and making sure your tests and everything, all your schedules are lined up is important. So being organized, big key.
I would agree. And even though I wasn't an athlete, you do learn a lot about time management, getting that college experience, because the coursework is not like high school. It's more
Right.
rigorous, although I found it more fun because you got to pick more diverse subjects, where in high
Mhm.
school you have to be a little more general. I'm wondering though, what was your favorite go-to spot at UConn when you had an opportunity to be a socialite?
Um, I would probably go to sports bar and grill. That's where we're, you know, all the athletes got together, you know,
Of
literally just
course, sports
athletes.
bar and grill.
Other than that, my favorite place to eat was Bagel Zone, and they it's funny because when you go in there, they have walls for different sports. So there's the basketball women's wall, the men's basketball, and there's Maya Moore's up there, Stewie's up there, Diana's up there, like all the greats from past years are up there. They have a track wall, so I go in there, I sign the wall. They gave me a T-shirt. They know exactly who I am because I used to come in there every day. So
I've had those moments where you go to like restaurants or eateries. Of course, I didn't have the following you did, but yeah, I know what that's like when people recognize you. It's like, hey, he's a familiar face, so it's kind of funny. Uh, what was I going to say? I don't know what you see yourself doing, but not only do you have a lot of great stories of athletes to draw from between yourself and all of the UConn players we've talked about, but to see, Stewie and Maya Moore take the
Mhm.
mantle for change. So not only are they continuing to excel in the sport that they became household names in, they're using their platform to do something more.
Yes.
How does that inspire someone like you to see your peers? You
Mhm.
talked about your buddies. These are people you grew up with, and they're taking the lead on topics that had been in the back burner for a long time.
It's really inspiring and makes me want to do a lot more. Because people know, you know, the pandemic did put a little damper on sports. But us as athletes, we realize sports is not our issue right now. There's bigger issues go at hand right now that everybody's dealing with, especially in 2020. You know, people are dying from the COVID and people are losing their jobs. So this is bigger than sports. And I feel like once sports did come back on, people were a little tied between both, you know, having sports back. Yes, we have something to watch, we're bored, but also like these athletes are putting their lives on the line just for entertainment, just to make a check because that's what they do. If they don't play, they don't get paid. So it's kind of like a dynamic, like, do I want to play? Do I want to risk getting sick? Or do I want to step outside of use my platform as an athlete and work on the bigger issue at hand?
And we saw that with the NBA and WNBA restarts.
Yes.
And the WNBA, it's amazing to see how much they've changed
Hmm.
from 4 years ago when the Lynx were the first to make a statement. Nobody was quite sure how to handle it. And if you don't mind touching on this, because you went to a school, well, I don't know what the makeup is at Hopkins, but covering their basketball and track programs as I have, there are a lot of athletes of color on those teams.
Yes.
And I don't know what the situation was like at UConn, but
Hmm.
how would you make? What would you make of that experience, and how has that shaped your identity over the years? Where, at Hopkins, it's normal, and I saw it as normal, and you kind of see some interesting contrasts between athletics and maybe the rest of the student body.
So at Hopkins, I mean, we had a pretty diverse school, but all our athletes were Black, of course. But it wasn't like, okay, we're gonna play all the Black kids. It's really based off talent. So if you got it, you got it. If you don't, you don't. So you just have to support your teammates. You're gonna get a chance to play maybe 2 minutes, maybe 1 minute, but you are gonna be able to see the floor. So just being, an athlete at Hopkins and at UConn, predominantly because we had a women's team. So we had people from all over. We had people from Bosnia, the UK, Uganda, Ghana. So yeah, there were different people of color, but they were all from different countries. So can't really, judge a book by its cover. So for me, we are dominant in different sports, but we are top, but we aren't very dominant.
How enlightening was that for you to be part of a track program and have that international exposure? Because I know, in like with UConn basketball, of course, even they got a taste of that with Svetlana Brosimova. If you know the history with her origins in Russia, but like you said, you can't judge a book by its cover, so you get to experience other cultures, and I have to imagine that was eye-opening. Not that you weren't aware of these things, but you got to practice and participate in meets alongside people from all over the world. That's really cool.
Yeah, my friend from the UK, her name's Divine. She competes for the UK team. I took her to Popeyes for the first time, and she came out with like 2 chicken fingers and some fries with no biscuit. I'm like, I went to the bathroom for 2 seconds. How did you mess up a number 2 order? A 2-piece with a biscuit and some fries.
That is funny.
Like,
but when you saw your friend from the UK, though, I know for them, biscuits can mean like cookies. It can mean a completely different.
Right. So it's different over here.
Right. Words have different meanings. Terminologies are different. And I imagine if you had an opportunity to go to the United Kingdom or these other countries, I'm sure you might have one of those moments. But that was cool, though. I don't know if you expected that going in, but how did that shape your perspective or open your mindset, if you know what I mean?
There's so many different people in the world. You never know where they could be or where they could be hiding, but they're fast. They obviously they obviously wouldn't be here if they weren't.
Based on all the experiences, the trials, the triumphs, the struggles, the successes, what advice would you give if you had an opportunity to meet a younger version of yourself?
I would say, really work on rehabbing your body and making sure that you're at 100% before you go out and do any type of task or any type of drill or any type of practice. Just making sure that you maintain your body and really take care of yourself. And then just having that mindset of got to go hard, got to grind hard, because the results are going to be amazing. They're going to put you on a different stage.
And I do have one more question. Should you qualify for the Olympics, will you be trying to get Phyllis Webb to join you, at least as a friend? So in case you stumble or need to pick me up again, she can go. Is she going to be part of your team in case you need a piggyback ride back to the team tent?
Definitely one person I would call. Definitely the person I would call.
Taylor, this was a lot of fun. You and I think we could go on for hours, and I know you have your training schedule, but it was a lot of fun just to share stories, catch up, and hear all of these great moments you got to witness and be a part of. I know you said the hardest choice of your life was choosing a college and choosing a sport, but I'd say it turned out well. Who knows what life would have been like if you had selected basketball? I think you would have excelled in that sport. We probably would have
Oh,
seen
yeah.
you outrun the competition. And I'm sure, Gino, if you had gone to UConn or another school, I don't know how many schools offered you. I'm sure one of them would have worked on your traveling calls and clean that up so you would remember to dribble before you sprinted. But no, you really are an emblematic example of how your family stick together. Even though you graduated from Hopkins many years ago, you still cheer on the next generation of athletes. And I can't wait to see you. I'm wondering though, if you come back to a Lynx game with
Mhm.
2 UConn products, what jersey would you be wearing?
Oh, I don't know. That's a hard one. Well, I have a Lindsay Whalen jersey and I have a Maya Moore jersey. So, of
I was
course,
thinking
classic.
more. I was thinking more along the lines of your fellow UConn buddies with Collier
Oh,
or
see,
Dangerfield.
that's a hard one.
Would
See,
they
if I
try to
wear
peer
one, I
pressure
have to get
you?
the other. If I wear one, I have to wear the other. I'm gonna have to get one with both of them put on there.
And then you got Stewie in the mix,
Yeah, exactly.
and Sue Bird. Now I don't know if you've met Sue Bird, but I'm like, man, God help us if you go to a Storm Lynx game. Whose jersey would you wear then? Who would you cheer for?
Both teams.
I was gonna say that semifinal this past year must have been rough.
Oh my gosh, I had to turn the TV off.
Like, I wasn't surprised Seattle won. Minnesota, they've done a lot better than I think everyone thought they would be at this
Yeah.
point. I think they're still a player or two away. And of course, Sylvia Fowles being hurt didn't help them. But
Yeah.
like, if that's what a rebuild looks like, I'm scared to think what will happen next year with an off season. I think people didn't give Minnesota enough credit. And you could tell there was kind of a burnout after they won their last title. And then it
Yeah.
doesn't take them long to regroup. Collier doing her thing and building off that Rookie of the Year season. Crystal Dangerfield, in my head, I'm going, the Lynx have found the next point guard.
Oh yeah.
And so many others. I'm like, man, that could have been you, Taylor. No. Best of luck to you, Taylor, as you prep for an Olympics, whenever it is. And if you make it, consider me part of your fan base.
All right.
Taylor Anderson, professional track athlete, UConn and Hopkins graduate. Hopefully you'll see her in the Summer Olympics. But even if she doesn't make it, you can find her on Instagram at Taylor's Gang with a bunch of extra G's. And you mentioned your websites are in development. Who knows? Maybe you'll start a podcast of your own. I see you've got a YouTube channel, and I could see you expanding the social media presence. So no matter what, there's a way to keep track of Taylor. Hopefully it will be in the Olympics, but whether it's a brand marketer, who knows? The sky's the limit. And I'm glad we had the chance to catch up.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Taylor. And if you want to be a guest on a future episode of this podcast and reminisce about the glory days and talk about the future, just hit us up on social media at the Mike Peden on Twitter or Instagram, or by email at tsvtelevision@gmail.com. All you need is a story. We'd be happy to share it. Thanks to everyone who tuned in live, and thanks to all of you who are watching this on demand on our YouTube channel. So until next time, thanks for watching.